What's up, everyone? This is Mark D'Amico. I just want to say thank you for giving us a listen or a watch. And please do not forget to rate, subscribe, or review us. We appreciate you giving us a listen. And here's the next episode of View from the Rafters, behind the scenes with the Boston Celtics, presented by FlexCar. All right, May 2nd, 2017 may be the most magical, the most emotional performance in the history of the Boston Celtics. Maybe, in my opinion, in the history of the NBA, when you consider everything that was going on this day when Isaiah Thomas comes out on the court in Game 2 of the Eastern Conference Semifinals against the Washington Wizards and drops 53 points on his sister's birthday. She would have been 23. She just passed away tragically in a one-car accident 2.5 weeks before that, and this man just floated out on the court and put forth one of the most incredible performances I have ever seen, the Celtics have ever seen, and the NBA has ever seen. We're going to get into a conversation with Isaiah. He's coming onto this podcast shortly here in a few minutes, and he talks all about what was going through his mind, what was going through his body on that magical and emotional night when he dropped 53, a career-high 53. But before we get into that, Sean Grandy and myself are going to just get some context as to what was going on at that time around not only Isaiah, but around the Celtics. So, Sean, when people rewind and ask you about May 2nd, 2017, what's your answer?
I tell them it was the top of a mountain that the Celtics and Isaiah Thomas had climbed together from where both were in 2015 when they joined each other, because I think that's what everybody forgets. Where was Isaiah Thomas in his career before the King of the Fourth, before the love affair with Boston, before these 50-point nights, before the entire league was talking about how Isaiah Thomas is one of the top 5 players in the NBA? Where was Isaiah, and where were the Boston Celtics in the winter of 2014, 15, when Isaiah Thomas got here?
They were nowhere.
Well, right, and it was almost by design, and that's what I think people forget now when the Celtics have been an elite NBA team now for 6 years, for 7 years, for 8 years, and you're coming off the new Big Three era. Everyone forgets about Brad's first year and a half here. The Celtics won 41.
Brad doesn't forget.
He doesn't, no, because in that 13-14 season, he'll tell you how long NBA games were, because Brad would MacGyver these lineups and different ways to defend or whatever, and he'd have a 12-point lead and then you look up, it's like only the middle of the second quarter, and there's LeBron on the other side, and there's Tim Duncan on the other side, and they're the elite players, and the Celtics couldn't hold these leads. They just didn't have the talent, and the Celtics, and Brad Stevens ended up way over 500, right, as the coach. The Celtics were 41-87 when they lost on Super Bowl Sunday, on the exact day that Pete Carroll decided, in the worst coaching decision in history, to throw the ball rather than run Marshawn Lynch into the end zone. On that day, the Celtics lost at home to Miami to drop to 41-87 in that year and a half. And the names, it's fun now to think of the names that came through, right? It's Gigi Jatome.
There's a long list of them.
When we say Vitor Favorani, he wasn't a casual Celtic. He started on opening night. He was a starter in Brad's first game up in Toronto. This was the era right before Isaiah gets here. Mark, this is when Jameer Nelson and Tayshaun Prince and all these players were cycling through. Austin Rivers was here, but he wasn't, for a week. He was on the roster. And the cavalcade of players, Brad and I were about to record our pregame in Indiana, and we're walking back from his pregame presser to the locker room, and I'm looking down at my phone, because even then we were doing it back in 2015, and I'm like, and I'm seeing Jeff Green stuff in Indiana. I'm like, Brad, before we start, you may want to call Danny. And because the players you have in the locker room, this game is about to start, you're not going to have the players you think you have. And are you even going to have enough? And that is it was losing, but it was also this chaos to go from the new Big Three era to what, Danny and Brad hoped was going to be next. And the Celtics certainly needed a catalyst, because Brad, as I said, had MacGyvered a lot of things together, but the Celtics didn't have an offensive force to drive some of these games home.
And then Isaiah comes, and they do. Somehow, this guy turns into an all-NBA player, 2-time All-Star, almost 30 points a game in the season that we're talking about here. How do you think that he turned into that guy that was just taking the league by a storm? I mean, this was – I've seen a lot of great performances, and Jason Tatum has been dominant throughout his career. But seeing this guy average 29 a game at 5'9" might be the most dominant performance that I've seen for a whole season with the Celtics. Just considering that he was only 5'9" and getting this done, I don't know how he did it.
And playing, again, the core group around him, and it's a core now that we think of affectionately. Avery Bradley and Jay Crowder and Jonas Jerebko is in this conversation, and all of the players that were helping the Celtics get close to winning games. But when I think of Isaiah's time here, I think it is the most symbiotic relationship I have ever seen between a player and a team as far as them needing each other to achieve what was possible.
No doubt. Yep.
And Isaiah just fit perfectly as that offensive catalyst that could score, and he was, as our buddy Kendrick Perkins likes to say, he was a bucket at that point. When he was healthy, he could score, and he could always do it. He had a big game against the Celtics playing in Sacramento a couple of years earlier, and there's always those guys that that are kind of Celtic killers, and you look at them and you say, wow, could this guy really be that good? But it was the perfect fit. It was the one thing they lacked, and the defense was obviously restructured around him. Remember, he was coming off the bench in 20, and in that year he could have been sixth man, but he had split between between the Celtics and coming over in the trade, and I think Jamal Crawford won again that year. But it took a while to get him in the starting lineup. But again, once this thing took off, and then fans who were appreciating the rebuild, were patient for the rebuild, were excited to watch young players again, just as they had 10 years earlier with Al Jefferson and with that Delonte West. Fans loved that team because they were young and they were rising and they were overachieving. And that's exactly what this team did. So there was already the potential for love affair, but Isaiah was a spark to the flame. And then there was this player that people identified with. It's hard to identify. Jason Tatum is as beloved as any athlete now in the last 10 years. We're entering Jason Tatum's era as the guy in Boston. But how many of us are going to be 6'7" with all-world gifts and live that life? People related to Isaiah. Mm-hmm. Fans related to him because, pick me last. Again, the last pick in the draft. And eventually this thing, became flipped. You had when Kyrie Irving came, Kyrie was the first pick in the draft. Isaiah was the polar opposite, always overlooked. And for most of us, we can identify with being overlooked and not appreciated and, everybody counting us out. That's the life that most people live. You don't live a Kyrie Irving life. You live an Isaiah Thomas life. And that love affair, and then you have the element of kids falling in love with Isaiah Thomas. And then they wanted to cheer anyway. And then when he was winning games for the Celtics, and all of a sudden, a team that this rebuild was supposed to last 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and within a year and a half, even this first year we're talking about, Mark, in 2014-15, the Celtics were 16-30. They were out of the playoff race. This was not a conversation. And this was the first magical part of that team with Isaiah at the head of it, was making the playoffs in 2015 when they would win on the road. They were winning all these road games on back-to-backs that made no sense. And it laid the foundation for a 2017 season in which nothing we thought we knew made sense again, because Isaiah was carrying the Celtics through fourth quarters, and suddenly this team that had been one of the bottom 5 teams in the NBA was inexplicably one of the top 5.
And one of the guys alongside him, you just mentioned, Avery Bradley, was his good friend, both Seattle, Pacific Northwest area natives. Avery was the guy who came and pulled him out of his media session and brought him into the back and told him what had happened on that tragic day, April 15th, 2017, when Chyna tragically passed away in that car accident. When my career is all said and done and someone asks me, what are the images that stand out in your mind? There's a few that come immediately. And one of them is that moment the very next day, game 1 of the playoffs for the Celtics against the Chicago Bulls. And Isaiah Thomas is sitting on the sideline with his head in his hands, and Avery's right there next to him with his arm around him, trying to console him and trying to help him get through to just get to that opening tip when the game can start and your mind can get lost in the game. That to me was, and again, this is 2.5 weeks before the game that we're talking about tonight, but that to me, it doesn't get more emotional than that and more emotionally involved for everyone surrounding the situation than it did that night.
the lesson I remember, and it was visceral, and I remember being on TV that day and talking about how it's a crazy life. Any of us who are in it, we join the circus. You know that. Like, it's going to take over your life, and there's crazy travel, and the people you're working with are not the people you're working with the next day. But what you have outside of the insanity, when you get off the plane, you have your family. And that is supposed to be the constant that is there for you to relieve the stress and bring you the peace that sometimes this crazy work life doesn't. And to have that taken away, to lose a sibling and a younger sibling, I remember saying that day, is not part of the deal. And Isaiah, I remember them asking me, are you surprised he's playing? And I said, that's the least surprising thing there is, that he needed to play. He needed to be in his environment. The great players, almost any player will tell you, step across that line, and that is your world, the world in which you have spent the majority of your life preparing for. So that is where you feel safe. That's your safe space. It seems insane for us mortals to think that millions of people watching you and having their eyeballs on you and 20,000 people in an arena all staring at you is a comfortable, safe place. But it is. I'm sitting here with a microphone in front of me right now. This is the life that I've chosen. And sometimes I think all of us are more comfortable in our professional environment when we can shut out, the real world. But your point about the team being there and the fact the Celtics were opening that playoff series at home and the fans were there for Isaiah, who had built that bond that I've been talking about over those 2.5 years, I think it was critical. And I think what I remember saying that day was, there were people in Seattle saying, releasing things like, well, some of Isaiah's inner circle is coming to be with him for these games in Boston. And it occurred to me that day, I said it during the game and on the pregame that day, his inner circle at that point was Boston. And the fans and the organization. And again, the end. And that's why it's so important when we talk about that day and that magic that happened to understand the 2.5 years that came before it, of this relationship that came out of nowhere, as most relationships that are life-altering, Mark, as you know, as we all know, most relationships that change our life came out of nowhere. And this one did within the confines of a player, a city, a team.
And so that night, as we all know, Isaiah takes the floor the day after his sister passed away. The Celtics lose that opening game. They actually lost the second game as well.
The Rondo series.
Yep, the Rondo series. And actually, we'll get into that in this podcast season as well when Rondo touches on that series and we have him as a guest. But then the Celtics rattle off 4 straight wins and they get to that next series. And the crazy thing that people don't remember when they think about this Isaiah performance in Game 2 is what the hell happened to him in Game 1. He got his mouth busted open.
Sure did.
Lost a tooth out of the front of his mouth as he was scoring 33 points. And in the one day between Game 1 and 2, I think it was something like 12 or 16 hours of oral surgery that he had to go through to be able to put his teeth back in just to be able to play the next day. That was the wildest experience I've ever seen of someone going through a medical emergency between 2 games of an NBA playoff series. Then he scores 53 in the next game.
It's why this is the Isaiah thing, as time goes by, is going to continue to grow as a fable, because it all really happened. It was all inexplicable. When the Celtics won the championship in 2008, that wasn't inexplicable. They had Hall of Fame players as one of the greatest. It was supposed to happen. It was going to happen at some point. It happened that first year. It was one of the greatest teams ever. We see great players. When LeBron James came into the league in 2003, you thought, well, this guy has a legitimate chance to become the all-time leading scorer in NBA history. Nobody said when Isaiah Thomas came into the league, he's going to become one of the top 5 players in the league, and he's going to lead a magical playoff run and almost every single night do something you didn't think it was possible he could do.
And he did. And you
Over
look
and
at
over.
Game 2, 53, and like I said at the start, it just felt like this guy was floating through the air. It really felt like there was some unseen force that was helping him to accomplish what he was accomplishing throughout that game. Incredible finishes at the basket, step-back threes, dropping He was abusing Markieff Morris throughout that game. actually fouled him out in overtime with one of his crossover step back. Actually, the shot that actually sealed the win. But just watching him float through that game is just what my memory serves. It just looked like something was carrying him. It was like angels in the outfield type of stuff that I was witnessing in real life.
Yeah, famously, Joe Dumars in the 1990 finals hit a famous shot against Portland, and he was playing that night not realizing, and his teammates and the other Isaiah Thomas, as we tie it all together, he knew that his father had died earlier in the day. And that, Isaiah always said that he felt that shot, it was guided in, right? And there was that magic was part of this Isaiah time, because it really felt as if all of us, particularly fans, teammates, were feeling Isaiah's pain. And as he went through the tragedy of his sister in that first series, and it really felt when he came back with a busted mouth, and there are those images on TV, right? It felt like everybody was going through his pain again, because the connection there between those two things. It's like when David Ortiz grabbed the microphone and said, "This is our city," in more colorful language than that, it was because he had become one with Boston. And among the many remarkable things about the Isaiah period of time was how little time it took for that to happen. David Ortiz had been here for years. Even. Right, exactly. But there are players who've been other places, and they get here and right away. There's no better example than Kevin Garnett. Kevin Garnett and Boston were two soulmates that just eventually got together. And once they were, you said, "Where have you been my whole life?" And that you felt that a little bit with Isaiah. And that's why the connection, combined with the spectacular things he was doing on the floor, which at that point, I don't know if you could make the unexpected and the shocking and the spectacular ordinary, but these performances, the one we're recollecting today, the Washington game, if you were a Celtic fan, you had seen it already earlier in the year, that game against Miami. Yeah. You had seen it all year, and really for the better part of 2 years. But as a starting player in 2017, I keep saying top 5. He was 5th in the MVP voting, which is outrageous when you think about it now, particularly as the game changed and smaller players. A few years later, the Celtics get Kemba Walker, and the game had changed where there's so many 6'7" wings, it becomes really difficult for a player 6'1", 6'2" to exist the way teams are playing offense now. And this is not that much longer before that.
Yep.
And here is the Celtics creating an MVP year around, Isaiah Thomas and going to the conference finals. When Isaiah got here, again, the reason I mentioned 41 and 87 is that it's not like you were a short cab ride from the conference finals. The conference finals were worlds away. When you make the leap in 2013 to make the trade and start over again, that is a leap of faith that an organization makes. History is concrete. We look back and say, it only took the Celtics a year and a half. And again, they were one of the elite teams again. Ask the Chicago Bulls after Jordan left. Ask any of these franchises that, now conference finals around here, people are like, well, yeah, the Celtics go to the conference finals every year. There are franchises that have never been there, that dream about it, and here the Celtics in just a year and a half are back in the back in the elite conversation. And in 2017, if you had said midway through that season, the Celtics are going to be, going to be in the conference finals, and all of a sudden there you are, and Isaiah's right in the center of it, having these, magical performances that are, everyone had come to expect.
In this magical performance, it started from the opening tip and carried through till literally the final second of the game. He opened this game with the first 8 points of the night for the Celtics, 20 in the fourth quarter, and then he scored or assisted on 11 of their 15 points in overtime after he forced overtime. It never stopped after it started at the opening tip.
And again, this moment and these games are so critical. The Celtics, first of all, fell behind. I want to say in game 1, they were down 16-0. They had played the Friday night game in Chicago. The game 1 got moved up because both the Wizards and the Celtics had won their series. So they played Sunday afternoon after the Celtics were in Chicago Friday night. I want to say we stayed over in Chicago Friday night, flew back Saturday, and then you had the early game Sunday, and it's like, wait, what's going on? And it's 16-0. And the Celtics came back to win that game, and these moments where Isaiah is saving the Celtics over and over again in game 2, the Celtics, except for game 6, didn't get a sniff of these games in Washington. So you had to protect home court. The series is remembered for the Kelly Olynyk game in Game 7, but you had to win Game 1. You had to win Game 2. If Isaiah doesn't come out of the phone booth here in Game 2 with his mouth all busted up, the Celtics probably don't win this series. And there is no conference finals, and Washington, which had been there, right, since they won the championship. So, again, these little moments, these are what makes heroes, are not just scoring 53 points, but that the Celtics needed every single one of those 53 to win a game that allowed them to win the series.
Are you friends with Ian Eagle?
You what? I mean, we're doppelgangers, right? I mean, broadcast-wise.
A couple of his calls during that game as Isaiah's going nuts. Isaiah Thomas, he's not human.
50 seconds to go. Washington up by 1. Isaiah Thomas. He's not human.
Isaiah Thomas is a machine.
Beal there defensively. Crowder the screen. Isaiah Thomas to the hole. Isaiah Thomas is a machine.
These are the things that the announcer of the game on TNT are saying about this guy that is just defying all logic in Game 2 of the Eastern Conference Semifinals as a 5'9" guard, just carrying a team where it needed to go.
That's the beauty of the national, in the playoff time, you get the national broadcast. And these are elite and all friends of mine, right? I and Brian Anderson, I think, had at least one of those Isaiah games in this stretch. You're not seeing it every night. Mm-hmm. And if you were a Celtic person, we had seen, Max and I had sat there and we had seen this thing every night.
The development from him coming off the bench.
You already knew he wasn't human, right? And to do it on that, you didn't know if he could do it on that stage. Remember, you had the playoff series where he played well against Atlanta. In the year before, he had the Schroeder dust up in 2016, the eventual, the future Celtic. But that was he literally, when I, recall Celtics history, I'm always going to be associated with the championship and that call, and who knows what we're about to experience, right? In the mid 20s. But it is Isaiah's 16-17 season is always going to be on my short list of things that I got to document in real time, because it did come so much out of nowhere. And when Ian or Brian Anderson or Mike Breen or whatever would come into a game and they would see these things, their visceral reactions it was defying what their brains had seen for all the years they had done it before, because we were seeing something that just felt like it wasn't supposed to happen.
And it wasn't, but it was. And I think the way that you and I feel this tie to that season and loves this guy so much, Isaiah Thomas, and why everyone was in his corner. And after that game, he's walking off, and David Aldridge at the time was the sideline reporter, and he just asked Isaiah, where is this coming from? How are you developing enough energy to do this?
Isaiah, the whole NBA community is in your corner. You know that. We know how tough these last couple of weeks have been, and especially this weekend. Where are you finding not only the strength to play, but to excel in this hotly contested environment?
My family, my friends, they tell me to just keep going. My sister wouldn't want me to stop. The only thing about it is once I leave this gym, I hit reality, and she's not here.
What was your reaction when you were talking to your listeners after you saw that history unfold?
That you try, my job has always been, and when you're doing the Boston Celtics, you get the opportunity to do it a lot. You're documenting history in real time, and moments are happening that one day, I don't know how many people were doing podcasts, in 2017 or whatever and stuff, but you knew one day there was going to be a podcast about what you're doing in real time. I remember walking to the bus for Game 7 in 2010, walking to the bus thinking, one day I'm probably going to be sitting on a podcast somewhere talking about walking to the bus and taking a video of people taking videos of the team going on. Because these are the moments, you're going to remember, because when I came here from Minnesota to become the voice of the Celtics, everyone then was saying, well, I haven't really watched since Larry Bird was there. I loved those Larry Bird teams in the 80s. And you got that a lot the first couple of years, because the Celtics of the 90s had, chased a lot of fans away. And as the new Big Three era was happening, you're realizing these are times that people for 20, 30, 40 years are going to remember. That stretch for Isaiah, you knew, was something that was going to live on its own in Celtics history. We didn't know what was coming. We didn't know, the Kyrie years were going to happen, and over, trips to the conference finals, and Ime getting here and going to the finals in 20. You didn't know that was coming, but you knew you were in the middle of something special. And as all these games were unfolding, it seemed he was having these once-in-a-lifetime games every week. And that was what made the year so amazing. He would have a night that you'd say, oh, man, he had 20 in the fourth quarter. I'm referencing that Miami game when he made the 9 threes. And you're realizing, wow, this is a career night. We're going to be talking about this. And then he does something similar the next week, and the week after that, and the week after that. And it was truly special as it was going on. And one of the things I remember most is that he knew it. He was a basketball historian. He understood the context of what was happening as it was happening.
And the day after, I remember we were talking just before we started recording here. You showed me a video of your son, Jack. He was 8 or 9 years old.
He was 5.
5 years old at that time. And Sean walks into the room and just hands him the box score. And explain your son's reaction as he saw through a piece of paper what Isaiah Thomas had done the night before.
So at that point, he was 5. I didn't realize, we didn't have Jason or Deuce at that point to realize that you don't have to put your kids to bed early. They can actually stay up and watch the whole game. But, my son, who was probably 3, 4, 5 during the Isaiah years, and naturally, like most kids, gravitated to Isaiah, and he became his favorite player. And it got to the point during that season where when he would wake up in the morning, if he'd wake up, if he was next to me or whatever, and I would keep the box score from the previous night, and I would hand it to him, and he would look across the box score and see what Isaiah did, because he knew enough about the numbers to know that there was that really big number next to Isaiah's name at the end of the column. And on that, that day when he woke up, I videoed it as I handed him the box score at age 5, and I watched his little face go across and his little 5-year-old eyes pop open as he sees the number at the end, and he's
53 points. Oh, wow. He beat his record,
53 points. Like, he knew even then, he knew it was like a career high. He knew it was special to see it. And, again, get overly emotional with your kids, but that's when you start seeing it through their eyes, you realize the effect that sports has on people, and particularly on kids. And Isaiah's effect, the beauty of Isaiah's effect on Celtic fans was that you could have been 5, you could have been 80, and he still made you smile with these performances. This entire team did. And listen, Isaiah was at the forefront of it, but there were a whole bunch of guys. We're talking about Avery Bradley and the Jerebkos and the Jay Crowders, and this team that was doing things. By the way, this team ended the Golden State win streak.
At home,
right?
Yeah.
Out there, the home court win streak out at Oracle Arena, and they were doing these remarkable things. And, of course, Isaiah was at the forefront, and he should have been, but it was a great tribute to the players around him, to the coaches of that team, that they created the environment that allowed Isaiah to make this magical, historic season, leading to this magical game that we're talking about, that lives forever. No one can ever touch that season, that 16-17 season. Celtics won championships before, probably win championships again, but that year, as a cable car turn from what was to what was going to be, can't beat it as a story.
Sean, you just used the word twice. Magical. I will not use that word lightly when it applies to the game of basketball, to performances that just stand out in the history of the game and especially of this organization. That night was magical, and there's no other word to describe it. And now it's time to listen to Isaiah Thomas describe in his own words what his experience was and what helped him to put forth this magical performance that we will remember forever here in Celtics basketball.
Mark, you know what I thought when I found out FlexCar was going to be our new sponsor?
No, what'd you think?
I don't know what I thought.
Neither did I, but then I went and checked it out. And it's basically a car subscription, and you choose the mileage package that fits you best, and that's it.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
it's honestly pretty cool. And it includes roadside assistance 24/7, car insurance, and maintenance. It's all included.
In one bill?
All in one bill. The only thing that is not included is the gas you put in the tank. And on top of that, it's cheaper. It's like 10 to 20% cheaper than buying or leasing a car. And what are you doing right now?
I'm finding my next car.
All right, well, if you're doing that, make sure you use the code RAFTERS and you'll get 100 free miles when you sign up. All right, man, this is a part of this podcast that I've been waiting for years, man. We launched this podcast 4 years ago, and I wanted this guy on the podcast with me ever since the start. It's Mr. Fourth Quarter, the king of the fourth, IT4, Isaiah Thomas, man, one of the most respected and loved players that I've ever seen come through these doors in Boston. How the hell is life, IT?
Life is great. First off, thank you for having me. You know, we talked about this for a minute, trying to get on the show. So I appreciate you inviting me. You know, let's go back to memory lane a little bit. But everything is great. Life is good. Family is good. My kids are healthy. I can't complain.
I see you posting pretty much every day the workouts you're going through individually, the workouts with your kids. Where are you at with that and trying to find a spot somewhere in this league?
You know, I'm just staying ready. I'm 34 years old, healthy. Just try to, you know, stay as mentally and physically ready as possible. I still want to, you know, pursue my NBA dream of you know, being on the roster and contributing and taking advantage of any opportunity I get. You know, most importantly, just try to give a helping hand because I know I can help an organization, you know, in more ways than just putting the basketball in the hoop. So I'm just staying ready. That's all I can say, you know, working out each and every day. You know, my mental is at a good place to where no matter if it does happen or not, you know, like I've given it my all. I've controlled everything that I can possibly control. And, you know, at the end of the day, I'm just going to continue to stay ready, continue to be around the game. And, you know, hopefully at some point I get a call and, you know, I take advantage of that opportunity. You know, spending time with the family and just staying in the gym as much as I can.
As the great Tony Allen once said here in Boston, stay ready ain't never got to get ready, right? I know you're staying ready. Hey, let's turn the clock back. Like you said, memory lane, man. Sean Grandy and I talked at the start of this episode, and the one thing that he kept going back to over and over is there was this perfect timing of you meeting the Celtics and the Celtics meeting you. It was like you both needed each other at that very moment for both of you to take off and get to where you wanted to get to. What do you remember about how quickly that love affair kind of started and grew here in Boston between you, the fan base, and this organization?
Man, it was like literally it was day one. Like, I remember flying to Boston, meeting with Danny, taking my physical and things like that. And he was just telling me like, man, this city is going to fall in love with you, right? Like, I'm not really hearing them because I just got traded. I'm thinking the Celtics is in rebuild mode, so I'm kind of hot about that.
They were in rebuild mode till you got here.
So I was kind of upset about that, so I'm not even knowing where my mind is. But when I flew to L.A., we played the Lakers the first game. I remember I ended up having a good game. I think we ended up losing, and I got ejected, right? This is when
I remember.
This is when I knew Boston was different. So I'm walking in the tunnel. I get back to the locker room, and I'm thinking, you know, people are going to be upset because I'm upset at this point. I'm like, damn, I just lost us the game. A good opportunity. I remember our former strength coach, Brian Dude. I walk in, and he's like smiling. I'm like, and I don't know anybody at the time at that point. So he's smiling. And then I think I remember asking him, like, why are you smiling? Like, it's a close game. I just got ejected. He's like, Isaiah, you don't understand. Like, the city of Boston is gonna. He said the F word. He said the city of Boston is gonna F it. Well, like, well, once I got ejected, he's like, that's the energy and attitude that the city of Boston loves. At that point, you know, everything's going in one ear or the other. I don't know what he's really talking about. But that day forward, like when I had my first game, I think a few days after that in the Garden, like I understood what he was speaking on. It was like I had a standing ovation when I got subbed in the game, and I never even played a game in Boston. I think we might have played 2 games before we played back home. So like when I experienced that, my first few games, the homestead after I got traded. It felt like college. Like the energy felt like college. The love I got right away. And, since that day, it's been the same way. No matter if I'm playing for the Celtics, no matter if I visit Boston, whether I'm on social media, like the love has been so genuine, and I don't know why, but like I take it. Like it's like you can't explain the love we have. The city of Boston, the organization, everything about the Celtics and myself. It's like, it's like a storybook this fake, I guess you could say.
You said you don't know why. I know why. Like it's brutally obvious. Like you can relate to the regular guy, right? Like you're 5'9". Like you made every kid out there feel like they could be you and that they would be you. And then how hard you played, the emotion that you played with, and it doesn't hurt how well you played, right? Like you add that all together and the crowd just fell in love with you. But the craziest thing to me, and Grandy and I talked about this, is there's been other guys who have been in the city of Boston or in New England who have captured the hearts of the fan base, right? Like you've got David Ortiz, you've got Paul Pierce, you've got Tom Brady, all these guys who have captured the city in the New England area. But you did it in like 2 years. They needed 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years to get to that level. Why did it happen so fast?
I'm not sure. I think I could piggyback on what you said earlier. It was like, I needed an opportunity. I needed a team to give me an opportunity that I always felt that I deserved. And then the city, not just the organization, but the city, I think needed a player like myself. And it just came together. Like you named it, all those legendary players that I got to build relationships with and be friends with. And I was only there for 2.5 years. You would think I won, the championships that the Celtics are known for winning and the city of Boston is known for winning. But it was just something that like you can't describe. Because my love is the same for the city. Like it feels like a second home to me. Anytime I come back to Boston, anytime I talk about the Celtics, any place I'm at in the whole entire world, people bring up, man, I love when you play for the Celtics. I like you made me fall in love with the game. So like I'm appreciative of the opportunity the Celtics gave me. I'm appreciative of the love that the Celtics world, the Celtic Nation, the city of Boston gives me to this day. It's genuine. It's like it's hard to describe, but it's there. And like I said, you would think I played 10 years there and won 10 championships. How much love did I get each and every day, each and every year that that I'm around here?
It felt like 10 years. And I don't know why. I think it's just because you were so great every single night. Like it was, Grandy said, it was like defying logic. Like our brains weren't working and understanding how you were able to do what you were doing. Averaging 29 a game, 50 in the MVP voting, it was just nuts. But all of that kind of culminates with that 2017 playoff run. You're only there for a little over 2 years at that point. City's in love with you. You're in love with the city. And it's time to make a real run. Obviously, as we know, some really difficult circumstances came up before those playoffs. Your sister passed away in a tragic car accident. And it really felt like you leaned on the city, and the city was there for you at that time. Like they wanted to make sure that you felt that love, and they were going to support you, whether you played or not. And you did wind up playing. That very next day, you guys lost the first couple games, but then you come back and win the next 4 against Chicago to take down the Bulls in that first-round series to move on. What do you remember about that series and being able to bounce back from being down 0-2 to winning 4 straight and advancing?
Yeah, that was a difficult series. Obviously, everybody knows what I was going through. Not just, off the court, but on the court, I wasn't 100% as well. So I think it was difficult in the sense of like I was going through some real shit, like in real life. And then my teammates didn't know how to interact or act around me. Like the energy of what we built the last 2 years kind of got thrown out the window just because like I was going through a real life situation. Mm-hmm. First 2 games, like physically I was there. Mentally, I was back at home. You know, I wasn't there. So I thank my teammates first and foremost for like sticking it with me, like being so respectful of everything that was going on. And then most importantly, just like being there for me, like each and every one of my teammates, not just my teammates, the coaching staff, the video coordinators, the equipment managers, everybody was literally there for me. And I think that's a big reason why the city also fell in love with me, because not only did my team go through this situation with me, the whole city went through this situation with me. Like I was able to continue to play games and, you know, continue to fight through what I was going through, but I was going through it with a whole entire state, like a whole entire region, a whole entire fan base that loved Celtics basketball. So I think that's a big reason why, you know, the city loves me as well, because we went through something that was so tragic and, you know, made something out of it for that 2 months or however long it was. So to, you know, rewind back to the Chicago series, it took up until like game 2, you know, like game 3 when we got to Chicago. And I remember just talking to some important people that I had in my circle and them telling me just like if you're gonna play though, like you got to try to be as normal as possible, especially around your teammates, because they don't know, they're walking on eggshells as well, because they're sensitive about the situation. They don't know really, you know, how to, you know, treat the situation or treat me at the time. So once I started to open back up and be myself just a little bit, at least during that time of us taking the bus to the arena, being at the arena, you know, taking the bus back to the hotel, like during that time, I had to try to be as normal as possible around my teammates, because I could see it took a toll on my teammates just because they didn't know, you know, how to interact with me. They didn't know how to go about, you know, the series, because I was like the energy to the team, you know, like everybody helped each other. But if I brought the energy, everybody followed, and the energy was, you know, taken away just because of what we was going through. So game 3 and 4, like I tried to be as normal as possible. And I think the energy changed in the building, the energy changed around the organization. And we just became, you know, even more closer. Down to number 1 seed versus number 8 seed. We hear the noise of the worst number 1 seed in NBA history. Like we hear all that. So our swagger and our confidence start to come back as I start to get a little more comfortable and try to act as normal as possible, you know, with the situation I was dealing with. So, you know, we end up being able to win 4 games in a row, which is very tough, but coaches made great adjustments. I started to play a little better. Our energy as a team, we came together a little more, and you just seen the sense of urgency, like we wanted something bigger than, you know, feeling sorry for what we were going through. And I say we because everybody that was a part of the day-to-day infrastructure of, you know, the Celtic basketball was going through what I was going through. So that's why I say we. So once I was able to, you know, overcome that just a little bit, ease the mind of everybody else, you could just see a change in the locker room. And that was amazing, because we fought back when nobody thought, you know, everybody kind of wrote us off after those first 2 games. Losing at home, being the number 1, 2, D-Wade and all them guys, you know, got big energy going back.
Rondo turning it back like he was with the Celtics again.
Rondo. Yeah. So you hear the chatter. It was a lot going on. Obviously, you know, I was going through what I was, but for us to change that around, you know, that you could just see the light at the end of the tunnel with that team when it came to, you know, championship that year. You know, it was just unfortunately how it ended. But
yeah. So when I'm watching it all unfold in front of my eyes, coming back from down 2-0, the way that you're playing, the way that you're carrying yourself, all that was going through my mind is like the one word, Herculean. Like this was a Herculean effort that you were bringing to the table. This 5'9" guy is bigger than life, like carrying an organization when really they should be carrying him. It was incredible to see, and you guys move on to the next round. You open up game 1 against Washington, right? I know you remember this. Down 16-0 out of the gates in game 1. Somehow you guys battle back and win that game. And why I say somehow, it's because of you. You guys battle back and win that game. But in the middle of that, you get your teeth knocked out. And like you're going into surgery the next day. By the way, you dropped 33 points in that first game to help the Celtics win that game. But that day in between, I don't think a lot of people understand the wild ride that you were on in that one day between games 1 and 2. Rewind the clock to what you can remember, because I'm sure you were all numbed up, all over the place and drugged up for 24 straight hours. But what was that like? How long were you getting the oral surgery to get your teeth fixed?
So that was a lot. That whole days leading up to the game 1 was a lot, because I was flying back and forth from Seattle to Austin. I flew, I think, from Chicago to Seattle. My sister had her funeral, and I came straight back. I think that game was at like a 1 o'clock game or 12 o'clock game. So
yeah, the game 1 for some, you guys won in Chicago, I think on a Friday, and somehow they gave you the early game on Sunday. It was crazy.
Yeah. So I remember landing in Boston at like 7 in the morning from that, red eye from Seattle. I remember going back to my house. My wife like, you should get some rest. I'm like, I might as well just stay up at this point. Like, if I go to sleep, it's just gonna be too much. Game 1 happened. Like you said, we're down 16-0. Like, they caught us. Like, never in any world would I think we would be down 16-0. Like, game 1, it's hype in there. Everybody's excited. We get down 16-0. It feels like we're down 30-0. We started to make a little comeback. I remember I tried to make a steal on Otto Porter, I think it was. His elbow hits my mouth, my tooth, and my tooth comes out. So I could see something like from our peripherals, I could see something fly out. It's no pain or nothing at that point. So it's like, I don't know what it is. I see it drop on the ground, but I think we had another possession. So the tooth was still on the ground.
I remember, I think someone ran and grabbed it.
I did.
It was you. Okay.
that possession carried on. We go back down that way. I'm looking at Ed Lasert, the former trader. I'm like, my tooth came out. I think we scored. There's a foul on the other end. And then that's when I go run and pick up the tooth. I'm not feeling nothing at that point. I'm like, I remember I get subbed out the game. We go in the back. The doctor says, that's a fake tooth, right? I'm like, nah, I never had my tooth knocked out ever. Like, cause he said how easy it looked like.
Yeah.
They thought it was like a fake tooth. So we try to put it back in. They say if the nerve is not damaged, you can put the tooth back in a certain amount of minutes. So they stuff it back in. They push it back in, hold it for like maybe 5-10 minutes. It don't move. I run back out. I think the first or second play, that shit come right back out. I'm like, it's over for that. I don't feel no pain throughout the game. Like, I'm good throughout the game. Then when the game ends, I start feeling pain once the adrenaline go away. I got to go to the dentist directly after that game. So little do people know, I stood 6 hours after that game in the dentist. That day. So they were wiring my thing shut, trying to figure out if they're going to do, trying to figure out what they're going to do with my teeth. So then the next day, I go, they give me all the meds, they numb me up, I go home. I can't even really open my jaw. My left side of my mouth is like swollen. The next day, I got to go in for 7 hours. So next day.
So 13 total.
13 hours of dental surgery between game 1 and 2. So they put a temporary in my mouth. Temporary, they try to figure out how my teeth look. They put a temporary in there. I played game 2 with a temporary. And then I don't want to go past that. So like, you might want to talk about game 2, but in between games 1 and 2, I was 13 hours in the dental chair. And from that day on, like, I'm scarred from the dentist.
I was just going to say, you never want to go back to the dentist.
Like, even when I go, like, it could be the most simple thing. I'm like, can I go to sleep? Can you put me to sleep? Because I'm scarred from, like, I wasn't put to sleep those 13 hours. It was just.
You were awake for the whole thing.
Trying to be numb and try to fight through it. And that's the only thing I could possibly do. And that was probably one of the craziest moments of my life. Like, having to deal with that on top of trying to beat an actual NBA team in the playoff in front of the world, like dealing with, my sister's passing, like it was so much going on top of, my hip. Like I was fighting through that. So it was just so much going on with me having to, just try to figure it out on the fly.
Some of the pictures from that game, like I hope you've got them printed and hung up in your house when you're smiling and you got that giant gap between your teeth. I mean, it's priceless.
My kids talk about, like, even my daughter, she wasn't there at that moment. She laughs about it all the time. Like, she laughs that my teeth, a few of my teeth are fake, like all of that. Like, she thinks it's a joke. So it's all fun and games.
It's all fun and games, especially after what you did in the next game. So a couple days later, you go into game 2, and it's even more emotional because it is your sister's birthday that day. And all you did was walk out on the court, and legitimately, like I said this at the start of the episode, that was the most emotional, magical performance that I have ever witnessed with my own eyes in person in the NBA. And I've seen a lot of basketball. That's at the top. I don't know how you did it. I don't know how it came to happen. And that's what I want to ask you. Like, how did you go through what you had gone through the previous couple weeks, then 13 hours of dental surgery in the last couple days, to come out and put up 53 points to take down the Wizards that night? How did it happen?
I don't know how it happened. Like, it was just one of those games where, like, it felt like I was really in the gym by myself. It felt like I was working on moves by myself. It felt like I couldn't hear anything. Like, I wasn't hearing the crowd. I wasn't hearing anything that was going on. I was just so locked in, not necessarily at a moment of the game. It was like, this is a big day for my family as well. Like, it's my sister's birthday. She just fasted a few weeks ago. So it was very difficult for me, but it was bigger than that actual game for me and my family. So I was just in a zone. Like, that's a zone I've never been in. I tell people, my friends, like, if you ever seen the movie The Sixth Man, like with Marlon Wayans, I think it is, that's what it felt like. It felt like somebody was there with me. It felt like when I got in the zone later in the game, it felt like I was at the YMCA with my sister, like I was when I was a kid.
You know what I said that it looked like? And take this as you may, but it looked like angels in the outfield. It was like you were being carried, floating in the air, doing, like I said, like something that my brain could not understand how you were doing this. But that's what it looked like to me. It was like you were just floating out there. Didn't matter who was in front of you. It was going to happen.
It didn't matter. Like that was a perfect description of it, like angels in the outfield. It felt like I was there by myself, but somebody was helping me. Like it was the moments I can't even describe. Like, I've scored 50 in the NBA a few times. I scored 50 like in my life a lot of times. Nothing like was like that. Like, every shot, every time I touched the ball, it didn't matter who was on me. Like, they were guarding me 2 or 3 guys at moments of the game. I wasn't even seeing anything. Like, every moment, like, when I look back at it, every moment, it felt like got bigger and bigger every possession. And when I was doing it, it was like I was there by myself. Like, I didn't see the fans going crazy. I didn't see my teammates going crazy on the bench. Like, I didn't see none of that. I was just doing moves I always did and just getting to my stuff. And it was like, it was obviously the best moment of my career because I could picture my sister like smiling, like, Dad, you're just doing what you usually do. And then like my parents, I could see my dad probably, even though he was going through the worst time of his life, I know he was probably smiling at the TV like, damn, my son is doing his thing on her birthday. So like, I didn't have no emotion in that game. If you see every basket, like I didn't even smile. Like I was just, my mouth was super big. Like I was just running back. I was just running back every time because like I told you before, my body was there, my mind was somewhere else. So like anything that was happening, it was just, I felt like it was just supposed to happen like it was.
It was wild, a wild experience for me to watch with my own eyes there at TD Garden. You scored the first 8 points of the game for the Celtics. So it was like you knew something, at least watching, something special was about to happen. Did you feel before the game like something special was about to happen?
So I didn't feel nothing special was about to happen, but me and my sister coach at the time, Jerome Allen, we always had some bets before the game. Like we always had like, you think you could get 40 tonight? You think you get 45? Like, how much you want to bet?
How about 53?
Friendly bet. So it was like, I remember us talking. He's like, you can't get 50 today. I was like, why not? Like that's the mold I was in. Not saying like I guarantee a 50, but he's only said 50 a few times. The time I played in Miami earlier that year, I told him I was getting 50 that night.
And you got 52?
And I did. That was on the back-to-back. I don't know why I felt that way. I just was like, let's bet I get 50. Like, and it was one of them nights. That day, earlier that day when I, shoot before the game, he's like, I bet you can't get 50. Like, it's set up for you to get 50. I'm like, I'm like, man, why not? My energy's not amazing. So why? It's all good. Like, it's what I do. And then it just happened. Like I say, later in the game, because before, at the beginning of the game, it was like a normal game. It wasn't like it wasn't like you said I had the first 8 points, but it was like in the flow of the game. Towards the end, it felt like it was just one-on-one here.
Well, you scored 20 points during the fourth quarter.
It felt like every possession, my teammates, you got it. I was at the park. So it was a dope feeling, but I was so lost in the game and everything else that was going on. I was just getting to my spots and rising up. It was just the flow of the game, and it happened to be 53 points like this. Like every possession just felt like stuff I just worked on every day, and it just happened to just be going in.
It was 1-on-5, and the 5 had no shot. That's the best way that I can explain it. But unfortunately, for the person I'm about to speak about, he got the brunt of it. It was Markieff Morris. And I know you're probably tight with him, and especially through Marcus with your time playing with Marcus. But he was the guy that you were going at quite a bit. You actually fouled him out of the game later on. But as I said, 20 points during the fourth quarter. You get to overtime. You scored or assisted on 11 points during overtime. And a few of them stand out to me. And I know I spoke to you about this before we came on here, but it was this one play, about a minute left in overtime, and this was the play that sealed the game. You were crossing him up, and then you did this step back, and he sticks his hand out, and he clips you on the wrist, and somehow you just flick the ball up, and somehow it goes in, and it's an and one basically to seal the game. What do you remember about that play and what you had to do to Markieff Morris?
So look, me and the Twins are good friends. Like we played Phoenix together. Those are some of my closest teammates. So the whole series, it's a lot of back and forth to a point where I'm thinking we're probably not going to speak after this series. Like that's how crazy it got. John's a good friend of mine. Like all those guys were pretty cool friends of mine. During that series, there was so much talking, and leading up throughout the year as well, it was so much talking and back and forth. There's so many things that happened to where at one point I was like, I'm cool. I remember telling my friends that was in town, like, I'm cool with not ever talking to him again. Just that's where it got to me. So when you see every possession and he's around and I score, I'm just looking at him every possession because I'm not even talking at that point. Because it's just so much back and forth. So when later in the game, a lot of the possessions we had ended up in switches at the end of the shot clock. And he was always in the switch. And I think the game one, he sprained his ankle. Mm-hmm. So I already knew his ankle was messed up. He couldn't really move like he wanted to. On top of him talking shit the whole time. So, and then every time
you're like, I'm just going to abuse this guy.
And look, every time I go in the hole, he's hitting with a little playoff stuff. So it was just leading up, and it happened to be him on the island every time, like 3 straight possessions. To piggyback on that play, it was just one of them times where I'm like, okay, I'm back at the crib. It's one-on-one, game point right here. I crossed 2 times. He puts his hand in the cookie jar. I get the ball up. There was some angels in the outfield type stuff. I don't know how the ball got to the hoop. It just did, and as you can see in that, Avery's picking me up, and I'm telling Avery my bad because I just messed up on the defense.
I was gonna ask you what that was.
I'm like, my bad, bro. He's like,
Yeah, I saw you see my bad. I'm like, what? You're bad. You just sealed the game.
but I'm not even thinking that. That's how locked in we are as a team. I'm like, damn, I just missed the ball. Take defense. I know he's gonna be hot, but that's what I was saying. So fast forward, I think Look is in the stands as well because every game, Marcus is, I think, is in the first.
Yeah.
At that point, I'm not talking to him either. Like, I'm not talking to him. All their entourage, their homies that they have around them, it's like, I feel like our friendship's over. So the fast forward throughout the whole series, we don't say anything to each other. Like, we don't say not one word. And then when the series ends, just to, fast forward, I remember he came up to me, he gave me a hug. He's like, I love you, bro. Mom said, congratulate. Like, it was all family stuff. And if you would have heard all the stuff that was being talked during the series, you would have thought we would never speak again. So it wasn't personal, but it was just because, we were both trying to win a playoff series.
So I'm going to get you out of here soon, but I got a couple more that I got to touch on. When you look back at that series and at that moment, and I know your kids were around and they probably understood it a little bit at that time. They probably understand it more now, but like, what are you going to look back on and remember about that moment? What are you going to tell your grandkids when your grandkids come around and they see this highlight on YouTube of you just doing the impossible? What are you going to tell them that you remember most?
I mean, I don't know. I'm going to tell you, you can get through whatever you're going through. The toughest, when you think you can't get through the toughest thing that you're battling, like you can at some point. Like, I felt like, not say I ever got through what my sister passing, like I deal with that each and every day. And the shit sucks. But during that time, when I was able to get to the gym, that relieved everything I was going through. So those 2.5 hours in the garden or in a opposing, team's arena, like I felt like I was back home with my sister in the YMCA like old times when we was kids. So that was super cool during those moments, and to look back at those moments and see like those were like legendary moments. Those weren't just 20-point games. Those were like legendary moments in the playoffs against a really good team. So I don't really know what I would tell my grandkids. Like I just be like, Grandpa was a killer, and like this is what a killer does, and that's what I was able to do. Shout out to all my teammates and everybody who allowed me to be who I was each and every day. Like I can't thank them enough, but like those moments I'm gonna cherish forever because not only the city and the organization, but my teammates went through real life situations with me that we'll forever have real bonds for. I forever love each and every one of them because they know what I went through. They know what they went through. Like we went through something that you will never be able to break. I think that's why ultimately the love is there for those teams that I played for. Like those 2 years I was there, everybody always speaks about, the heart and soul of those teams. And that was not just me. That was each and every person involved during those years. That was like I get most of the credit, but that was each and every person, each and every day. Like, I think also that's why the love is there too, because I treated everybody like they should be treated. Not like I'm a superstar and everybody was below me. It was never like that. I think that's the reason why a lot of people, seem to fall in love with, what I'm about as not just a player, but as a person.
I'm one of those people, man. I'm always going to be a champion for you, and that's the exact reason why. Like, you treated everyone well. It didn't matter if you were scoring 30 a game. It didn't matter if you were scoring 53 in a playoff game. Like, you were always you, and I think that's why people appreciate you so much. And I hope that, looking back at those wild, magical 2.5 years that you were here, you can now have some context as to, like, exactly what you did. I hope you understand that, like, now there's kids who are 18, 19, 20 years old who are buying tickets to come to Celtics games because of you. Like, you are the reason.
Mark, that's crazy you say that because the more and more like I'm around like AAU and my kids stuff. And just like around basketball things, people come up to me and really be like, you changed my childhood. Obviously, that makes me feel old. It's like, that's the reason why I keep going. Like, I don't know how many people I touch, but I know I can touch one in some way, some fashion. And when people come up to me and say those things, that makes me look back at that time like I'm super thankful for those moments. I'm super thankful for the Celtics for giving me an opportunity that nobody really would. I'm super thankful for, the city bringing me in with open arms. I didn't understand what I did, the records I was breaking, the class I was in. When I say the class, it's like the Bill Russell, the Larry Birds, the Kevin Garnett's, the list go on. I didn't understand I was up there with those guys and certain things I was doing until I was hurt and I was out of those moments. Because those moments for me, which my whole life, I always was onto the next. I was always so paranoid to like, man, it's just not good enough. So even when I scored 53 or 50, like I would go back home and be like, man, I should have had 65, really. Like I was just never satisfied until I was out of those moments and I was able to sit back and watch those situations and be like, dang, like even with my kids, I sit back because they like watching all that stuff. Like I didn't realize how major I was doing. I didn't realize how major, me and my teammates were doing like at that point in time. On top of playing for the Celtics, like I wasn't just doing it for, no disrespect to any small market team. I was doing it for, like I go around the world and people be like, dang, ITL the Celtics. I've never seen a player like that. The Celtics, Bulls, Knicks, Lakers. That's probably the 4 teams that you can go around the world and see somebody with a jersey on. So I'm super thankful for all those moments. I'm super appreciative. Like I don't take none of that for granted at all. Like I wish I can go back and be in those moments, because it was so on to the next. Or I wish I could be in those moments now in terms of just, I was such a killer, I didn't appreciate those moments at those times. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I wish I can go back and just look in those moments and just appreciate what was really happening at those times. But you live and you learn. I'm appreciative. I'm super thankful. And every time I speak of those moments, I just have a big smile, even though I went through the toughest time in my life. Like I always say, I had the best year of my career that season, but the worst year of my life at the same point. So if you let that sink in, it's like, it was super cool, but I also was going through some real shit.
Yeah.
No, there's no question about that. But, this episode is going to be an opportunity, like you just said, about like reliving those moments. Like I know Celtics fan base is going to go deep on this episode because they want to relive those moments with you. That's what it's all about, man. Like you literally changed lives and you had an incredible run here, and no one's ever going to take that away. And I appreciate it. I appreciate you. I know the whole Celtics fan base does, and we hope we see you around here a little bit more often here in the future. And I can't say thank you enough for coming on here with us.
You already know I appreciate you, Mark. Like I appreciate the love and support you've always shown me from day one. It's super appreciative. Like, I'm just super thankful. So I appreciate you inviting me on. Hopefully we can do something in the future for sure. Hopefully I'm in a game and then you interview me after I drop maybe like 15 and like 15.
Love it. Love it. Let's do it. Mark it down. All right, man. I appreciate it. Thank you. Good luck. And, hopefully we see it on the court soon.
You already know. Thank you so much.